Before the success stories, the progress, there was you. You who made a choice to grow, to inspire, to overcome your own challenges. At NASM, we're in service of your limitless potential, because when you keep growing, we all get stronger, and we'll never stop making your journey our mission. Join the fitness leader. Become a fitness leader. Become a certified personal trainer.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's very special Master Instructor Roundtable. I am Wendy Batts, here with my friend and co-host, Dr. Marty Miller. Marty, how are you?
I'm doing great today, Wendy. How about yourself?
I am doing excellent. Well, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our two guests. We are super fortunate that we have the #1 overall NBA draft pick. That was in 2009, a 6-time NBA All-Star, a winner of Rookie of the Year, which was in 2011, a slam dunk champ. He was a 5-time All-Star NBA team guy. He was on the Clippers, the Pistons, and the Nets, and the Celtics. We are super excited to bring on Blake Griffin joining our show today. So hello, Blake.
Hi, thanks for having me. Thank you for the wonderful introduction too. Beautiful. Except for you didn't have to say
your whole resume. It would take me all day.
You didn't have to say that I was a rookie in 2011. It just reminds me of how old I am now in the sport.
Well, 14 seasons. That's something to be super excited about.
Impressive.
But we also have your friend that has been working with you. I say friend, but he was really your manual therapist and trainer for 8 seasons. And how you dealt with this man for 8 seasons, I will never know. But he is the owner of Athletes Health First. He also owns Emerge Stronger Physical Therapy. He's one of my dear friends as well. And I'd like to go ahead and bring on Trevor Harrison, who's going to be joining us.
How you doing?
Hey,
Trevor, how's it going?
Good to see you, everyone. Blake, good to see you.
Always good to see you, Trev.
You miss me? It's been a while.
No, I don't miss the workouts, but here we are.
We're going to dive into that for sure, Blake. But no, we're excited to have everybody here today and talking about, Blake, your career, the influence that Trevor had with different sports medicine techniques. So I'll jump in, get the conversation started. You've dealt with injuries throughout your entire career, first being in college, and then the second before even starting your NBA career. So did that shape how you approach your training regimen and taking care of your body? And then can you also kind of give us an idea of how that evolved?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely shaped how I viewed not only training, but recovery. And then also getting, as I got older, a little bit smarter about maximizing the time spent training or how I was training. So, I always felt like I put a lot into my body. And when I enrolled in college, I was a health and exercise science major. And the main reason was I enjoyed that, but I also felt like that would help me throughout my career. The more I knew about my body, the more it could help. So I always took it very seriously. I had some super unfortunate injuries. I didn't have like a lot of strains or pulled this or pulled that. It was more, some of just sheer force, I think, from sort of weighing a lot and also, trying to run as fast as possible, trying to jump as high as possible. There's wear and tear over time. But as I got older and with the help of Trevor, I was able to minimize those and put a lot of time into recovery as well, to make sure I could, withstand the demands of the season.
Awesome. Well, Blake, I have another question before we start going in with Trevor here. But you have sustained injuries, and one of the biggest things that I hear often is that, especially athletes, when they're coming back and they're ready to give their all, there's still some fear that they're going to re-injure themselves. So, how do you overcome something like that before you go back and start playing hard minutes on the court?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. It's something that people always ask. But for me, I never really had that mental block. And I think for me, it was about trusting the work that you put in. I sort of early on, I sort of adopted this this idea that like when you get injured, like you give yourself like the day or maybe a couple days. You have to have surgery. Give yourself the day of surgery to sort of do that thing where you kind of feel sorry for yourself and you're like, oh man, this is awful. But after you reach that 1 day period, that's what it was for me. It was 24 hours to sort of just feel sorry for yourself. After you get past that, like there's no more feeling sorry for yourself. You have to put everything possible into rehab. And that was like day of surgery or day after surgery, I'd start doing like some brain training stuff on my phone, find an app, read a book, do something to sort of distract yourself and just understand that like anytime you rehab an injury, whether it's major or little, you're going to have days that are good. You're going to have days that are bad in terms of, some exercise you did the day before might have felt fine. And then the next day you're sore, you're not used to it, whatever it is. And you sort of have to have this mental game with yourself where just because you did something yesterday doesn't mean you're going to be able to do it today, but that doesn't mean you took a step back. It actually means you took a step forward because as you guys know, like, exercise, rehab, all this stuff we do is about sort of tearing down before building up. And it's a good reminder when you're going through rehab to just know that like it's not just this linear upward march. It's like this. It follows the career of success versus failure. Nobody just goes from the bottom to the top and has no speed bumps. So I think that was probably the biggest thing is just diving into rehab. And that helps get over that mental block once you are back to performing, once you're back to your sport. Is knowing that you put in as much possible work as you can and knowing that you touched on every little detail to make yourself successful.
Excellent. Those are great points, Blake. And, you made me think of a saying I've heard for a long time. I can't recall who should get credit for it, is that life's not a straight line, right? There's going to be ups and downs, but you're looking for that trend line, as you mentioned, to be moving in the right direction. So thank you for that. So Trevor, coming over to you, we heard Blake talk about just getting bigger, stronger, more powerful, so can you explain how you would use the NASM methodology with Blake, looking at range of motion, adding in your manual muscle testing, those isolated strength techniques and integration? And I'm going to make an assumption here that you had to teach that stability and deceleration, which we talk a lot about within the NASM model.
Yeah, no, it's like when I first met Blake, we were there for doing the therapy. We did an assessment at his house, and so we did the range of motion, did everything that side, and then as we got to know each other and as we got to kind of figure out where he was at with what training he's doing with the team. And then as the off season approached, we kind of would discuss kind of, hey, what are the needs? What are you looking for? And right away, working with Blake was pretty easy just because he kind of knew what he wanted, right? So it was, and then we can add to it and adjust to it. So a lot of the focus was, deceleration, multiplanar activities, making sure that stability wasn't just a couple extra stability exercises, that it actually was a clear phase of training. And then, as we produce the off season, the goals, then we can undulate the training kind of from there on, but really trying to figure out what his needs were. And obviously, he could jump before I met him. So I don't know if we really need him to jump any higher. So for us, it was, what can we put together and what has he done in the past that he likes and everything else? Then how can we integrate that, the OPT model again, for the first off season that we got to work together.
Great.
Blake, I'm going to ask you the question that I know Trevor definitely wants to know. Well, first of all, I want to know how you guys met, but then also you chose Trevor, especially towards the end of your career, for 8 seasons to be with you more than he was with his wife and his family. So I know it's not his amazing personality. So can you kind of walk me through from beginning to end with this man right here?
Yeah, I mean, we got connected through my business manager, Lauren Clark. I think they had met maybe in Atlanta. But I was looking for a new trainer. I was looking for a little, like Trevor said, more manual therapy, more table work than I'd had previously. And I'd always, obviously, like I said earlier, put a lot into my body. And when Trevor came in, we did the assessment. I asked him to explain everything he was doing. And once you like notice a difference right away, I'm like day one, like your range of motion, ankles, we would do the assessment every day, big toe, ankles, knee, everything. I quickly realized how important that was. And I quickly realized range of motion from day to day can change. And some days we'd work on this and it'd be fine, or other days we'd have to spend more time. And you notice that change right away. But over the 8 years, like Trevor just said, it just progressed. And he became family. Like you said, we saw each other more than we saw our own family. So, I'm sure there was times he wanted to rip my head off, and we had our battles, daily going into training and doing everything. There's, we have good days, you have bad days, like I talked about earlier with rehab. But I truly appreciate his approach and everything he did and how he treated the people around me. Like, I'm not kidding when I say he became family. I mean, we were together all the time. So those 8 years were they were super important for me in my journey. But the 8 years went by very quickly, and it's always great to work with somebody like Trevor.
Excellent. Thanks for that. Like, you've been known as one of the most athletic players in the league. You jumped over a car to win the slam dunk contest in 2011. That's etched in my mind. I remember watching it. Highly impressive. When you start with the Clippers, how much time and effort do you spend in your program to prepare for something like that when you know that you're heading into the slam dunk contest versus what do you do for your 82 game season?
It's all about the season. I mean, the dunk contest is fun. It's something I watched as a kid and I always wanted to do, but that was like, All-Star weekend. Our last game is Wednesday night, and then All-Star weekend basically starts Thursday. Dunk contest is Friday. So there's zero preparation. I remember I did have to do a dunk contest rehearsal, and it was mostly just because they wanted to make sure I could make it over the car. So I did that Thursday night, and that was kind of the only prep. So all of my training is all for, in the summer, it's all for building up to the season, and then everything you're doing during the season is to maintain. And you get better over the years. I remember my rookie year, right after the All-Star break, I remember I hit a wall that was just like a week or two of just feeling like I was so tired, like couldn't get out of bed as easily. Like I just mentally, physically, and emotionally, I just sort of hit this moment. And then the next year, it was just back to business, and you make it through the whole season. Each year, you find these little tips and tricks. And part of that too is being able to listen to your body and knowing, like, all right, it's not a practice day, but you got to come in and you got to get your work in. And sometimes, you can go a little bit harder. Sometimes, you might have to pull it back. And that's what's hard, especially when you're young, when you feel pretty good all the time. And, you can sort of just power through a slow day of truly listening to your body and maybe taking it a little bit easier, or some days pushing yourself a little bit harder. But I always felt like the off season for us, for Trevor and I, was like, that was the moment where we really put a plan together and executed. And, it was super interesting for me learning, like, this day's strength, this day's power, this day's stability. We're doing total body, we're doing lower body, we're doing more plyos. It was like our first true full summer together, 2018. I think it was truly like the time where I felt like I ran the full gamut of, like, doing everything, not only conditioning and strength training, but just all the little subsections of those things. And that I was sold, from that moment on. So I always felt like I did that, but having Trevor to sort of be the guide for that was eye-opening for me, for sure.
Awesome. Well, Trevor, this is actually going to go back to you. And those of you guys that have just joined us, we're talking with NBA 14 season basketball player here, Blake Griffin, and his therapist and trainer, Trevor Harrison. And we're really trying to focus now a little bit more on, we saw where you've started. You're talking about kind of implementing and being a part of the programming, Blake. But Trevor, what phases of the model, if we're going to kind of go back more towards the NASM methodologies, did you use mostly with Blake in comparison to in season and out of season?
Well, a lot of the in season was not more difficult, but we're always working with the team, and trying to, so we should sit down and talk to the staff and say, hey, here's kind of, we're coming at the end of the off season. Here's where we feel kind of, what's best for Blake. And it was really important that Blake was a part of the team and working with the team staff. So we didn't, one of the things that we talked about was we weren't going to isolate Blake and be like, oh, he's got his own private guy, when, he's got a great staff there, kind of working for him. So we would discuss consistently and trying to stay away from just some of the traditional just strength, that type of stuff, where we were adding some stability training and a little bit of power training as well. And then in the off season, I think it really just depends what was going on. We undulated all the phases. And it was just a priority of what we, if we needed a little bit of it, obviously to get a little bit more power, we need a little bit more of a strength gain, then we'd have, maybe one phase of muscle development in there. But then to get more strength, you also need more stability. So we'd also have one day of stability in there. And it really just because we mapped it all out, we were able to kind of change what we needed as we go, but we had a plan always. And so it's really easy to change these little progressions going through if it's all laid out. If there was any type of injury where he needed a little more muscle development to come back from that, then we'd have to come back. So, I'd say at the beginning, probably a little more stability type work, but then really as we progressed over the years, it was really, kind of probably about 30% of each that we would kind of go through. Like, does he need a lot of max strength, type of thing? What was necessary about that? Him and I would talk about that. And so we'd have to add some lower rep work and making sure that, like, hey, if we're gonna do lower rep stuff, you got to rest after, just so we're not doing like max strength conditioning, kind of thing. So it changed year to year, but it changed based on what the goals were. I remember one time showing up at the beginning of the off season, Blake's like, hey, I want to get a quicker first step, so then you got to kind of sit down and map it out and say, okay, well, how are we going to do that outside of just what we do? Is there anything we can do in basketball, anything we can do on the turf, everything else as well, and how to get that result that we both wanted.
Excellent. Blake, we talked a lot about the off season. I think a lot of the people watching can understand how you train throughout, a structured off season where that is your main goal. But can you take us behind the scenes, a little bit of snapshot, a day in the life or a week, or however you want to describe the NBA versus game days versus obviously days off, travel, so people can kind of see how complicated that can be and how you guys really have to manage everything, road trips, etc.
Yeah, there's 4 different days, I guess you could say, within an NBA season, right? You have your, excluding training camp, but once the season starts, you have your game day. Obviously, you have your practice day. You have a day that's not necessarily a practice day, but you're still coming in to get a workout in and get skill work in. Then you have your off days. So a game day typically is like Trevor and I would meet first thing in the morning. And we would go through our table work, maybe do a couple stability exercises. Then I would do what we usually call on every team is movement prep. It's like 30 minutes of work. Go out to the court. I would get my court work in. You have shoot around, which is more of a walkthrough. You're not really physically exerting too much there. You come home and you probably have like 2-3 hours maybe to yourself to grab lunch, grab a nap, get dressed, go to the game. And then you sort of do that whole thing all over again. I'd meet with Trevor again, do my prep work, go out to the court, warm up, have some time to yourself, and then you sort of do that all over again. So game days are just like a mental challenge to make sure that you hit all those things. A lot of people ask, like, if I had superstitions. I didn't have superstitions, but I had a routine. And the routine, again, like when I talked about rehab and feeling confident, the routine on a game day is what made me feel confident going into games. And there's like that saying that victory loves preparation. And the more I prepared and the more I made sure I hit every single routine. I mean, I had my routine down to like the minute. At this minute I'm doing this, at this minute I'm doing this, and every single game day is like that. And it's funny because over the course of the season, everybody else's routines sort of mix in with your routines, where you might be doing the same thing at the same time as somebody else, or you're both on the table, you're both stretching, or you're both doing this. And so you kind of get this weird like dance of like everybody's sort of going their own way, but then you cross over and you have these little moments where you might go up to a teammate and do a handshake at the same time every single game or before the game. So those days are really interesting, and it's tedious. It's more about just having the routine and doing the routine. Practice days are sort of a whole different thing where I usually like to get to the gym 2.5 to maybe 3 hours early, depending on what I was going to do that day. If it was a lift day for me, I get there a lot earlier. But it's the same thing. Trevor and I work. I go out, I get my lift in, do on-court stuff. So it's really, to me, like any advice that I give to an athlete, like going into a professional season, even college to a certain extent, it's just tougher with class and all that. But you get your routine, you map out your routine, you see what's working, be able to change it, and don't think that it's a superstition where you have to do it every day. But once you get into that routine, I think it helps with like that mental thing every day of like, oh, I got to do this, and this. It should be mapped out, and you're just following it, and you make tweaks and changes here and there to help sort of keep it fresh or address needs that you particularly need. And then for off days, I sort of got into another routine of like, sometimes I would go into the facility and we would do pool walking, as a form of recovery. I would hit the boots, or Trevor and I would do a session at night, sitting around watching games. So over time, and then travel days are another aspect of it. And Trevor and I implemented a lot of different things, whether it was the Fireflies or Mark Pro on the plane, or getting a session in right after we landed. There's just there's so many different things that you can do. It's just about making sure that you stay consistent. I mean, I think with all modalities, especially when it comes to recovery, consistency is the key thing. I could ice bath on Monday, but if I don't do it again until 2 weeks from then, like, sure, it helped, but I think over time, getting that routine really helps. So, I could literally talk for an hour of just my routine during the season. I won't bore you with all the small details, but having that routine is super important. And another thing, it's not a case for everybody, but like Trevor mentioned, having somebody like your trainer, being somebody who can seamlessly fit into the team staff is super important, just because it's, the team is sort of like a family, and any outsider, you kind of throws things off. So that's one thing that I really appreciated with Trevor is everybody that he worked with on each team that I was on, has nothing but great things to say. And I think that's super important for a young trainer when they come into a certain situation. Is I think it's most important to get it right, not to be right. And sometimes you have to sort of take a step back and figure out a way to fit into that puzzle piece, just because everybody has a job that they're trying to do. And I think being on the same page is so important, because at the end of the day, you can always get to the end goal, or you can find a way to achieve what you want. But it makes it tough when there's people that are sort of butting heads, so to speak.
Well, Trevor, that brings me to a question then, kind of based on what Blake just said. Obviously within the different organizations that Blake was a part of, did you ever have any problems like accessing the training room or working with the staff and you being the guy?
Well, I think Blake and I established earlier on that we didn't want to be that. I didn't want to be the guy type thing. So
you were the guy for 8 seasons, so that says a lot. Blake is very patient.
Well, we were really fortunate. Like when we, in the Clippers, I had, because we did some training with the NBA TA back in the day and taught some courses. I did have a relationship with a lot of the trainers already. So, we really just, you look at the environment and you adapt. So the Clippers was great. We talked a lot with them and we kept them updated. And so my always thing was like, hey, they've got 15 players to take care of. They shouldn't be asking me what I did with Blake. So we communicate with there. With Detroit, it was awesome. The organization allowed me in there, which actually worked out great. And luckily we developed a great relationship even before COVID, because it would have been tough not to have a relationship. But we were a little more hands-on with Detroit. And then, with Brooklyn, same thing. You see what you have, and they, both Brooklyn and Boston have amazing staff. So a lot of times I was allowed to take a step back, because, we communicate so well with the team, and Blake would come back and we'd know what he did for a workout. And if there was a slight injury or something, they communicate with me, I would communicate back. And so it was nice to be able to not always have to be like in there all the time, because like I said, we spent a lot of time together. And it was also important on a recovery standpoint to know that, like, I didn't have to always be the one doing the therapy. If he did therapy there, then we don't have to do anything until tomorrow. Whereas sometimes, you got to do it that night because you're not sure what they did that day. And then all of a sudden you realize you've done like 7 days of manual therapy. You know what I mean? It's just so we were really, really fortunate with the teams that and how open they were and how awesome it was. And there were some great, there were some really, really good practitioners that we got to work with.
Excellent. And Blake, following up on that, so we heard Trevor's side of it, but what about you as you're going from team to team as an athlete and you've got your routine? I'll never ask you to, say who your favorite was in a sense of the teams, but did you find a similarity as, the NASM principles did become more common in the NBA, or was there times where it was a struggle because maybe what you guys wanted to accomplish maybe hadn't been fully adapted into that team's methodology yet?
Yeah, I think I spent 9 years in LA with the Clippers, and from the time I got into the league until really I left the Clippers, training staffs had changed so much. When I first got in, it was, head trainer, assistant trainer, a strength coach, maybe an assistant strength coach, and I think that was kind of it. You would have maybe somebody else helping in the training room, tape ankles and stuff like that, but then by the time I left the Clippers and went to Detroit, like the staffs were starting to get more filled out, and a lot of teams sort of took the principle of European football teams where like they're spending real money on their training medical staff, and it makes sense. It's a shame that it took that long for teams to realize how important it was. But then, especially going from Brooklyn to Boston, two very similar setups where they had, it was a robust medical and training staff, and they really had everything covered, and they were both really, really good about the same thing that I said earlier. It's most important to get it right, not necessarily to be right. And they were very thorough. Like Trevor said, both teams had some great staff members, and I think they're definitely ahead of the curve. Now, I haven't been haven't been with the Clippers organization in a while, and I'm sure it's like that now. But they were sort of building that out, and I don't think any team was quite there yet when I first got there. Detroit, actually, the head trainer in Brooklyn is now the head trainer in Detroit, or I think he has a bumped up title, and he's great. So I'm sure he has that, situated a little bit better. And just over time, as people learn more and as teams are willing to spend more on the care of the players, I think things have gotten better. But I'm still close to this day with so many of my head trainers, assistant trainers, everybody all around, and those are the relationships that you truly spend so much time, and it's time like on a table talking, doing therapy, doing little exercises. You spend so much time with the training staff that you like really get to know them in sort of a different way than you do even your coaches, because coaching, you're on the court, you're doing things, you're busy, you're in meetings. It's not just time just spent talking. Some of the best training staffs, Boston does a great job of like every road game, there's a trivia thing on the wall. And so guys come in and they try to get the most trivia points for the whole year. And the strength and training staff, every home game, there was a trivia. So it was like away we had trivia, home we had trivia, and it just kind of gets people talking. And I told our head strength coach in Boston, I was like, this is such a great like team building exercise. Like I if I had a company, if I was running a company, I would implement that somehow, like some form of that. I think that training staffs in sports do a great job of finding ways to sort of break up the monotony of like doing the same thing over and over and over. So it's definitely made me look at it from a different perspective.
Well, as a lifelong athletic trainer, I thank you for that plug. So I appreciate that.
Of course.
So Blake, let me ask you a question. Who was the hardest person you played against and why?
I mean, there's always like the names of like, for us, you know, like I didn't have to guard Kobe often, like one-on-one. I didn't have to guard LeBron one-on-one often, but there was guys like Tim Duncan when I first came in the NBA, Dirk Nowitzki, who those are obviously, you know, huge names and Hall of Famers. But there's also guys like, you know, like LaMarcus Aldridge was so hard to guard. Zach Randolph was very hard to guard. He played with Memphis. There's certain guys who like they might not be like as big of a name, but like you see that matchup and you're like, I'm in for it tonight, you know. And I always loved those matchups, but you just knew it was going to be hard every single minute you stepped on the court. So those are two or those are four guys that like really stand out.
Trevor, I'm going to come back to you, especially that you've spent time with elite athletes in different sports and you've worked with multiple people. Can you talk about the mindset? Obviously, we're getting to learn, you know, how Blake looks at things, but obviously, as you're working with someone like Blake and you're getting your routine down, good days, bad days. And I think a lot of times people forget these athletes are humans and they have a life that can still impact their outlook on what they're doing in the training room, et cetera. So any tricks to the trade, or where did you learn some of your skills on how to deal with the mindset so that way you could get them to be the best version of themselves?
I mean, first of all, so like starting out, you know, I played professional international rugby. So I think that really helped going into it, just understanding, and I was hurt a lot, which was weird because I missed a lot of tackles. So I'm not sure why I was hurt so much, but it was just, so I kind of, again, just the lifestyle. I mean, my whole family's full of pro athletes, my brother and sister, my dad, you know, my nephews and nieces. So I think that really helped kind of going into it. And then, you know, I think, but being like some of the athletes I've worked with, like Blake, like they expect the best from you. Like if you're going to be there, like you're expected to be the best at what you do. And so the expectation there was really high. And again, it's a lot of pressure and everything else, but it just makes you do, like, you want to do the best job because of the level that they're at with their training. And so, you know, and it's, we've all worked with some of the athletes that are a little bit easier and stuff like that, but it's like the expectation from Blake was, I mean, you know, he set the standard really high, you know, and so, you know, and it's one of those things where, and you care, right? So you got the double entendres, you got the emotional a little bit on the business side, and you just want to do what's best. So I think it's easy to a certain extent, but then, you know, sometimes it's tough, you know, and especially with injuries, you know, you gotta be there, and you got to be able to, you can't be like, oh, I'm helping the person, they get injured and then run away. So you got to be there if there's something, if there's a negative side as well, and you got to be able to, and you also, like working with Blake, one of the biggest things other than, you know, friendship and everything else and what he's done for my family, things like that. One of the things that I've really learned from him is it's okay to say, I don't know. Like, I just don't know, but let's figure it out. You know, there's a couple of times where, you know, walking into Blake's house in LA and he's got the iPad with the anatomy app open. And I'm like, oh boy, here we go. So, we're going to talk, you know, but that's the level. Like that's what people like, and that's where, like, when Blake talks about like being organized, like even the off season, like, that's the thing is you have to be, and that's where the OPT model kind of was really necessary, because we map out the entire year of when we're going to see them, what phase we're in, when we're going to see them for corrective exercise, for therapy, and you map that out, and then it gives you a level of professionalism too that you can adapt, because 100%, it's the weather, it's 100% of the time it's going to change. But if you're organized and so that's just what what Blake's done with me is really set the standard super, super high for being a professional.
Love it.
Blake, you had to teach him how to be professional too. That what that comment meant?
Okay.
None of that sounded like a good thing. Like, he was like, yeah, some guys are easy to work with.
Yeah.
Not Blake.
Well, Blake, so we've had Grant Hill on one of our podcasts before, and again, he's someone that I hold very near and dear to my heart, and I always ask this question too, just to kind of get more personal into your preference of training. What is the one exercise? Because let me take a step back. As a personal trainer or a strength coach, you know, we have to program on the corrective side all the way to power. You know this because that's what Trevor did with you. And you just would assume, without working with professional athletes, that the high intensity, the really heavy lifts are the exercises that the players either love or hate. And Grant's, for example, was the sideline leg lift with the ball, so he had to like something that's very stabilization, slow and controlled. So what is that one exercise that when Trevor would program, you would just be like, he must be having a bad day?
Yeah, I mean, I know Trevor knows the answer to this. Like overall, like a major category, conditioning. I could go on the court and condition on the court all day and it'd be fine because I'm distracted by the ball. Like, so I'm like a little kid. You just get distracted that there's a ball around, there's a hoop. But the single like tedious exercise for me was like step ups or like the lateral step ups, because especially when it wasn't like an explosive day. Explosive day was sort of fine and you're getting through it. But, I can just hear Trevor's voice, like, slow down. Like you're just like concentrating on that eccentric phase of the step up. Was just, I don't know what it was, man, but like every time I had step ups, we'd have like a 8 each side, not alternating, but 8 each side. And then I'd go to the other side. I'd be at like 6 and I'd be like, what am I doing? Like, this sucks. And then you finish those 8 and then you got to do the other side. And those were killed. Those were mental more than they were physical, I think, for me. I don't have an explanation as to why. That was just what it was.
No explanation needed, Blake. I think we all have the same feeling on eccentrics and step ups, but there's probably some correlation to with what you practicing the basics over and over and over isn't the sexiest thing, but it's what makes you excel, right? So maybe there's something behind that as well. But the fact that you even said eccentrics, the fact that you had the anatomy out, how much of that was just your passion to be at your best, or do you still kind of geek out a little bit about that exercise science that you talked about that you purposely studied kind of as a precursor investment in your career?
Yeah, no, I still love it. I mean, I to this day, I still care about now working out on my own and not preparing for a season or getting through a season. I still I'm very, I plan the night before what I'm going to do the next morning. And it's like one of my favorite activities, at night before I go to bed is like to like sort of have that plan together. But like the anatomy app, stuff like that, it was just, for one, it was like just listening when I'm in the training room, listening to what trainers are saying to like the team doctor, or maybe the chiro comes in and you're hearing all these words and you start to and I always ask a bunch of questions to know. I always wanted to know why I was doing something. Not because I didn't believe that was the right thing. If I know the why, then it helps me get to that mental place of it's important and it's going to be a part of what I'm doing. So I did the anatomy app out, and I loved it just because you could strip away, muscles, you could get to the small ones, you could get to, the ones that the knowledge of little intrinsic muscles that I have is going to be very useless for the rest of my life, but I love it.
No.
It's like something that I really enjoy. So it's always been something that I loved like anatomy in high school, and then I loved like kinesiology was one of my favorite classes in college. It was just something that I loved. So I hope that it helped. I mean, in some ways, I probably overthought some things, and I definitely probably made Trevor go crazy sometimes, over explaining some of the things I was doing. But for me, it was important.
Well, it clearly stuck. You're dropping intrinsic, eccentric. I mean, pretty soon we're just going to have you host this podcast, and Wendy and I can take a week off. But now here's my quick follow-up question, and you can leave it as a yes or no. You're programming for yourself, so you told me that. You told us all that. Step ups, yes or no? Are they still in there?
They're in there. Actually, it's yeah. I do them now, and I'm like, man, I probably should have just like sucked it up and done more of them. But yeah, I'm like right now, I'm doing more hypertrophy, like lower body. I don't like to lift like super heavy upper body, but doing more hypertrophy upper body, and then I mix it up too. But I took a page out of Trevor's book, so. Some days are easier than others, but and I have gotten better at resting, not just like rushing through a workout, especially in like the hypertrophy or strength phase. So Yeah, it's been sometimes I'm doing exercise. I'm like, yeah, Trevor was right. Trevor was right. I knew he was right at the time, and I usually always did him. But
feel free to text that once in a while too. You're not.
you know what? This is good. You got this recorded. You can
Play
play
it
this over
forever.
and over. Yeah, exactly.
Well, Blake, I saw on a podcast that you did with Lance Armstrong. I'm a huge fan, obviously, of him.
Mhm.
So when you were on his podcast, you said that you were playing golf now. You're spending more time with the kids. I mean, you're retired from the NBA, which congratulations to you. And but what do you do to get yourself prepared to golf in comparison to what you did, obviously, for a game?
Yeah, I
Is there
have
a
a
big
whole.
difference?
Yeah, in a way. I mean, I do have I go where I'm down in the gym by like 6:30, and I usually work out 6:30 to 7:30. And I was also talking to my brother, and it's like it's kind of amazing how quickly you can get a good workout in, prep, workout, and stretch afterwards when you don't have to, prepare and do balance exercises for 30 minutes or this and that. But I do have like my own routine now for like a pre-golf round, which is a lot of core, a lot of like single leg stability. But I've focused a little bit more on I guess that's not true. We focused on stretching and all that, but I do focus a little bit more on like especially hips for me, being able to like get around my body and Trevor and I put a lot of emphasis, or Trevor put a lot of emphasis on T-spine, rotation, T-spine stability and all that. So that's something that I found that like always helps. I always feel much better when I hit like certain exercises. So again, I have my routine for golf now. The stakes are a lot lower, but it's still important to me.
No, that's amazing. It's good that the routine continues, and I'm sure as an elite athlete, that's what got you there. And it's kind of hard, I would say, for most athletes to give up that routine. You got to fill it with something else, right?
Exactly.
So with that being said, we could honestly, Wendy and I could talk to you guys for hours, but to kind of, as we start to wrap this up, what's next for Blake Griffin?
A lot of golf, but and just being able to spend so much more time with my kids has been great, and watching them play sports. I get so much more nervous for their games than I ever did for any of mine. So that's been great. I started a production company 2016, 17. So I'm here in my office now. So we're doing a lot of scripted film and TV stuff, some unscripted stuff, some sports stuff. So that fills most of my days. And my brother and I do a lot of investing, and we focus in the health and wellness vertical. So it's really cool to still see, get to see the new things that are coming out and sort of have a pulse on how the industry is moving and what new products will affect the future. So I think, again, like all this whole conversation and my whole love of health and exercise has sort of lended itself to that. So still kind of talking about the same things. About it.
Still doing your step-ups.
Well,
Yeah.
Sideline leg lifts for Grant, step ups for you. I mean, who knew, right?
It's a trend, Wendy. Glute medius, right? There's something there.
There's something about that little muscle. There you go. Trevor, I have one final question to you, and it's mainly a leave behind for the trainers that are listening. If they want to aspire to be you and they want to be able to work with professional athletes and everything, what's some advice that you could give to our listeners on the steps they should take in order to be successful and work with someone such as Blake Griffin?
Yeah, I think not to just plug the NASM side of it, but like the CPT model for us, for me, it just changed everything. So being able to implement and be organized, and then the flexibility I had inside there for Blake and for all our athletes, it's a game changer. And so for to get the right education, get the right background, and then really implement what's inside the model. And it's easy to stray on different things. It's easy to just do the easy strength exercise and everything else, but to truly implement the model during off season, integrate it in, undulate your training, and then really have the results. Figure out what the results you want in the off season, and just map it out to get there. And I think that's like I said, for me, beginning stages of doing this, we used to go off script all the time. And then if something happened, you didn't know what to do, and then like, what caused it? Was it this? Was it that? So at least with here, if you need to go off script, you can, but what you need to change. So just stick to the model, and you'll see the amount of flexibility you have inside that model is unbelievable.
Yeah, Trevor, thank you so much for pointing that out, because, Wendy and I do these podcasts every week, and the purpose of this podcast really is to help develop the people within our, NASM family that are CPT certified. And sometimes you see the model is very rigid, but it is incredibly fluid. So, hearing that in your closing statements, we really appreciate that. And Blake, first and foremost, thank you for taking time out of your incredibly busy schedule, but also once again, validating the 25 years plus of what NASM has done with creating the model, putting it to test, evidence-based, and knowing that it is the best performance model out there that everyone can apply to whomever they're training, because everyone's an athlete. And to hear it from you with your resume, and it really resonates. So we can't thank you enough for that as well.
Of course. Big believer. So thank you guys for having me.
Awesome. Well, Trevor, Blake, thank you guys so much for joining us. And we look forward to possibly maybe have you come back on. Maybe we can do a little golf fitness programming with you later on, Blake.
Yeah. I'll send over my workouts.
There you go. We love it. Thanks, guys, so much. We appreciate that.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And guys, thank you all for joining us today on the Master Instructor Roundtable. Again, we were super fortunate to have two of the best in the industries and in their sports, what they do, on joining us today. So if you have any questions, comments, please be sure to send information our way. You can find me on Instagram at wendy.batts13. You can also email me at wendy.batts@nasm.org. And Marty?
Mine will be popping up right here, dr.martymiller72 and marty.miller@nasm.org. So Wendy, great time. So again, we'll definitely take everyone's information, feedback. We'll let Trevor and Blake know what an amazing podcast this was. So thank you guys for joining. And most importantly, we look forward to seeing you next week on the Master Instructor Roundtable.